Probably it's more like, okay, this is not the lecture room, so how do we call it? The backyard room didn't sound that nice.
Hello, welcome back. I hope you had a great lunch and coffee, so there's not going to be a lot of food coma in the crowd.
Welcome back to the Lakeview room. We actually have a lake here. I've been told the garden room doesn't even have a garden, so you are actually in the right spot. We have a great program for you in the next almost 2 hours. There's going to be a little break in between. There's absolutely no exiting. No, I'm kidding. Please stay with us. We have a great program.
Yes.
We forgot to say names, right? I'm Thomas Kuber. I currently live in Berlin. I'm founder of a super boutique studio, that means for small, called Futur 2. And
I'm Laila. I'm an interaction designer, currently based in Qatar, but originally from between Italy and Egypt. And I'm happy to introduce you our first speaker, Giovanni Pestalozzi. During her talk, Designing Ethical AI, Principles and Examples in Digital Experiences, we're going to learn about how to analyze common principles for designing ethical AI applications, and we'll explore examples from the web integrating these principles in AI products. So Giovanni is a professor and UX and human-centered AI interaction designer, researcher, and project manager. And she has a PhD with a specialization in technology risk and perception and risk governance. So I welcome on stage Giovanni. And looking forward to this talk. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you all of you for coming to my presentation. I hope you had a very tasty and enjoyable lunch, and also enjoying the conference so far. So as indicated before, I will present to you some principles and examples across the web using ethical AI. The contents of my presentation is this, some words about me, then I will show you some concepts that have been presented by organizations in Europe to shape what is ethical AI. Then I will present some ideas around technological risk perception and how this influences design and ethical applications, and some examples across the web. Some words about me, first of all. I am an experienced strategist. I work currently at Cognizant as a lead experience designer, and I support organizations, brands across industries worldwide, designing experiences that help their customers achieve their goals and have delightful experiences above all. So my background is in technological risk perception. I did a specialization applying principles, theories that have been identified that describe why people perceive certain technologies of high risk or of low risk, depending on different factors that have influenced them in their socio-cultural context. So I will show you some highlights of this and maybe inspire you to identify these principles and these factors when designing your AI applications. I'm also specializing in project and process management, and also conduct some further training on strategy execution. So let's dive into the topic directly. So what are principles around ethical AI? I have based pretty much this presentation on what the European Commission has proposed is ethical AI. They brought together a group of experts across the region that represented different institutions and different sources or different areas of knowledge. And they agreed on this list that you see here. First of all, there should be respect for human agency. So people should feel in control of the data that they are sharing, the data or the information that they're interacting with in an AI application. The human autonomy and dignity and their freedom should be respected whenever an AI system is being applied to a specific use case. The second element is privacy and data governance, which is a concept that is pretty much known by many of us. It's already a concept that is actually protected by the GDPR in the European Union. So essentially it is that people should know what data is being collected from them, what mechanisms they have to retrieve this data or to delete it whenever they feel like doing that. The third element is fairness. So everybody should have equal rights and opportunities to either interact with the data they have shared or the processes or the model that is being designed to provide them with a service. The next element is sustainability. So ideally, AI applications should be designed in a way that does not cause harm to people or to the environment surrounding people. In this case, it is important to define who is accountable for those impacts. It is either the user who is interacting with this application and giving it different uses. On one hand, those that are initially defined by the organizations what is the purpose of this AI application, or going beyond these uses. So if people decide to implement it for any other application, there should be a framework or a mechanism to backtrack who is responsible of this. I want to highlight that these principles are right now at an let's say, idealistic phase. So it is presented at the European level Commission, but it is not really, as they are now, something that it is mandatory for organizations, for businesses to follow on this. It is more like a guideline on how organizations should strive to design their AI applications. The next element is transparency. So people should know the purpose for what their data is being collected, how the system is functioning, and how the entire process is working. So there should be some source of knowledge that should be provided or should be enabled in the interface for people to know how the model is working, how their data is being collected, and how this is being processed. And finally, accountability and oversight. So the people should be able to understand the model, to supervise it, and to control it. So again, it is pretty much idealistic, but I will show you some efforts that are being conducted in industry to integrate these principles into real life. So moving on from what the European Commission has proposed is ethical AI, I wanted to show you a summary of what are principles that have been acquired or adopted in industry across major tech organizations, so namely Google, Microsoft, and IBM. So they have come together and defined what is human-centered AI. So departing a little bit from a bit strict terminology around ethical AI and making it a bit more operational, they have come to the term of human-centered AI. And it also integrates some new elements that go beyond ethics. So this embeds responsible AI, as you may have heard before. And these principles try to bring together these different elements. And one of them, of course, is starting with focusing on user needs. So this is anchored in what we in the design community already know. We need to start with a problem that addresses a human need, or a user need in this case, or a customer, as you may name it. So that should be the center of the application. And that should be defining the next steps or the different features that are being provided. So it should be justified whenever we put a feature in an AI application to satisfy a user need and not necessarily to make an application more technologically advanced, but rather that is justified for a user need. The third element is transparency, and we have already discussed it. So essentially, people should understand what the model is doing and for what purposes the data is being used. Trust calibration is an important element. As you can see, this was not integrated or explicitly defined by the European Commission, but trust calibration is essentially around making sure that the high expectations of people are properly calibrated to what the AI is able to deliver to them. And for business people, it is particularly important because across the user journey, there will be moments in which users can lose trust or can gain trust in whatever the application, the AI, is providing to them. So in that regard, trust calibration combined with the different other elements, transparency, for example, and feedback loops and control, are very important to make sure that users first adopt the technology and then keep using the application later on. Then the fourth element is feedback loops and user control, is essentially to provide affordances in an interface that enable users to easily provide the data that is needed for the model to run effectively, and also to provide settings mechanisms for them to change or share whatever they think is necessary to complete their tasks with an AI application. And finally, data ethics, which is what we have been discussing previously. It's pretty much known and essentially driven by the European Commission with the GDPR. So that's, in a nutshell, what major tech corporations have translated ethical AI into their day-to-day activities, into the products that they are developing, for especially Google, trying to make sure that human needs, people's needs, are reflected in the AI products that they are designing. And they have created their own guidelines, their independent ones, but these principles reflect a kind of an overview of what these organizations have been doing around human-centered/ethical AI. So it is important to remember why human-centered ethical AI is important. And one point is relevance from a regulatory point of view, essentially in the GDPR, to respect people's rights around privacy, around sustainability, and about fairness and equality. Another aspect is customers' trust, and I will show you later on what is important when people are interacting with the new technology, what factors are influencing them to consider this new technology useful for them or not, or what are biases that they may have that influence a set of groups of people in society that, for a business point of view, it is important to integrate so that they become loyal customers to our products. And finally, because of sustainability goals. So sustainability includes people, includes their values, their beliefs, and what they think is important. So businesses more and more embrace these new concepts. And AI, besides that, also provides an opportunity to make processes more efficient and put in an element of human centricity, embedding human ethics, people's ethics, or groups of people that define what is important for them. It is also of relevance. Good. So now that we have understood, we have seen what are these principles that these global businesses have identified as relevant around ethical AI. I want to show you some elements that influence risk when deploying AI products, and what are these factors that are influencing people around risk perception. Okay, so here is an overview of what are different, like the landscape of risks that surround AI. So they may be an enterprise risk, economic risk, societal risks, control risks, security and performance risk. So you have risks that go from an application point of view, from the system itself, to what is business and the context-wise of a product. And both of them are important. On one hand side, you have risks that are measurable, that are quantifiable, and that can be made more efficient within a set of processes in an enterprise. Other kind of risks are more, let's say, soft. They're more around what people perceive is a risk, which is independent of a technically measurable risk or not, or an actual risk that exists in an application or not. And in many cases, you may have become aware that there are news that surround AI applications around mismanagement of data, misuse of data, or around wrong information that is being provided to people. And this is particularly important in specific industries, like in healthcare, where there are high stakes, like human lives that are being treated, or also in banking and finance and the insurance sector. So you have high amount of money that is being treated, or being managed, and in that sense, people who are direct users of these applications need to feel that the entire system is actually something that they feel that they can control, that is safe, that is reliable for them to continue using, and also to put their resources and even their own lives at the expense of these applications. So you can have a look at all of these at your own interest if you find them of value. But an important risk that we need to take into account is reputation, for example, that it is directly linked to what people perceive, the customers think. It is the value of this application, how this is affecting different groups in society. Here is an overview. It's a sketch that reflects what we know, what we understand in theories of risk perception, the context of risk in society? What are the social cultural elements that influence people's attitudes when they are confronted with a new technology? So you have the cultural background that involves the worldviews of people, if they are egalitarian or not, if they are more rather conservative. What is their personal identity? If they feel certain groups may be inclined to using new technologies and others not necessarily. And these are things that are of personal interest, personal inclination, which may be accentuated by their interaction with other groups in society that think like them or not. And then you have also political, societal, and economic aspects that surround technology. There are also cultural institutions that may support the development of certain innovations and others that not necessarily. So what may be a great development or a great innovation here in Europe may not be necessarily that welcoming in other parts of the world, in another society. Other layer is the socio-political institutions, which are personal values, the socio-economic status of people, the media influence. Normally, it is actually a fact in theories of risk that the media accentuate or enhances the perception of risks around certain technologies. And depending what is the source, if it's rather conservative and what is the agenda of these different sources, certain risks may be accentuated, which can lead to a detriment of an entire industry. So this is also something that needs to be taken into account by people who are dealing with AI. And overall, you also have heuristics, and heuristics is around the shortcuts that people make when they are presented first time with a technology or any application. These are shortcuts, so essentially if they have had bad experiences before, or they think a friend has said that an AI application has not worked for them, that person may be predisposed to the technology itself. So all of these elements need to be taken into account, both from a technical point of view, those that we know we need to account for example, data management, the processes, the cleaning process, and maintenance of the data, as well as the perception that the people have, the customers have around this technology need to be taken into account and properly managed. So here is an overview, also a summary of how these different sources of risk or factors that define risk perception are represented into people's attitudes toward technology. So one is personal control, and this is easily designed by us in an application. You create settings, features that help people feel that they're in control of the AI. And this will help them perceive that they're actually in control of the data that they are sharing, or actually in control of the model that is being integrated in the application. Institutional control, if there is a perception that the organization, the business that is designing this application is actually working in an ethical way, if there are no scandals around data management, for example, an organization like Facebook may face serious reliability or reliance on people whenever they may present a product that involves AI, because there is already knowledge that there have been scandals around data management. So this is a very important aspect. And so on. So you have familiarity, you have blame, and also inequitable distribution of risks. There are certain groups in society that are less exposed to AI, and that may not be necessarily well represented in data sets with AI. So if you have, for example, an application that detects humans and certain groups are not being properly sampled in the data set, that may put them at a certain detriment. So that's a very important aspect, and especially if those groups feel that they are not, for their particular use case. If it's around healthcare, for example, it's a serious issue, and we all need to be accountable for that. Good. So I would like now to show you some examples of how these principles have been depicted in different applications across the web. I tried to map here what are the principles that have been embedded or embraced in the industry, as I mentioned before, by Google, IBM, and Microsoft, and what are these principles that the European Commission has proposed. So you can feel free to review this later on, and I will then present you the examples across these two elements. So the first one is to focus on user needs. These are the first one here is a screenshot from LinkedIn. And as you can see here, the first picture indicates, did you find this post valuable? It's already asking the user. And this is also an example of feedback that is being required or is being enabled, explicit feedback that is being enabled in the interface. And the part here that is important is to consider that the question is if it's valuable for the user. So the model is being shaped in a way that increases the posts that are perceived as most valuable by users, and not differently, not necessarily, although behind the scenes, of course, there may be several ways that this model is being optimized, but what we can see here essentially is that users are asked if this information that is presented to them is valuable or not, and then followed up with some other questions like why yes or why not. And finally, then they're presented with a box that says, okay, their response helps, or their feedback helps improve their experience with this application. The second example is from YouTube, and here essentially what is indicated is that they are being provided with this video, with this suggestion, because they follow a channel that presents similar content. So here there is an assumption when the model was designed that users may be interested to satisfy a user need would be linked with the topics that interest them. So it is essentially, it's an indirect parameter that is being used here to conclude that users may be interested in this type of content. So it is a general example of how user needs are being considered for designing AI. It is, of course, important to take into account that when these principles are operationalized, several factors are put into place: business factors, customer interests, and software capabilities, among others. But in essence, we should start to define what is a problem around an actual user need that satisfies a business value. So another example here is around transparency. And well, here on this image, we can see from Google Shopping that if you hover on top of for you, something like, okay, this is recommended for you to buy, you get this recommended based on your browsing. So it is information, is short, is to the point, but in some way it is helping users understand why they are being recommended an information. I would find it a little bit strange if I, for the first time, log into a website or access a page and then I'm recommended something and I have never interacted with this page. But at least you are given here in some way. It is a bit hidden because you need to hover over this title. But in other applications, in Amazon, for example, they include a sentence that says, explicitly and visible why people are being recommended certain products, either for your browsing because you accepted cookies, which is essentially the fact, or because you have bought similar products, or because you are of a certain age range or certain geography. So it's a way users are being explained or are provided transparency into the model. So here is another example from LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is here, or the developers or designers in LinkedIn are providing users with information why they are recommending people to follow. And they say, okay, because you recently followed AXA Switzerland, we think that you may be interested in following these people. So as you can see here, we need to be careful into the assumptions that are made in the design, and also into the different parameters that are being optimized. It may be the case that someone is only interested in AXA, but not necessarily interested in following people who work for AXA. So therefore, may be useful to maybe provide some more factors, more elements to optimize this. However, it is also good that you realize that there is an X here, so people can press in that X, and then the box is removed. So that's a way of control mechanism. And here you see a mixture between transparency and feedback and control. Feedback in the sense that, well, the more users close these kind of recommendations, the system is optimized to provide less of those recommendations. And also people feel in control of this interface. Okay, so here is an example of trust calibration. And this is a chatbot from Virgin Pools. And trust calibration, it is essentially to help users align into what AI can actually deliver for them. In this conversation, as a user, you start, and the first thing that you see is, okay, ask me a question and I'll find the answer for you. When I was interacting with this, I was really amazed because I felt like, okay, I can ask anything. Of course, it was in a context, it was a health application, but the way the question was posed is very broad. So there is no context in which direction I should ask or what exactly this bot can help me with. So I then ask some things, and I get some recommendations on articles I can read. And then it asks me, how do I want to get in touch? And there is only one option, so why is it then asking me, Why just provide the option? In any case, the point here is that the context or the frame, the extent to which AI can actually help, should be defined from the very beginning in the interaction with the user. So, for example, the chatbot could have said, I can provide you answers around our services, our contact information, our experts, what would you like to do next? Something around that. Otherwise, it is very general, and believe me, there are users who are very creative and can ask anything possible. And in that sense, if people are not very interested to dedicate much time on that, they can just simply drop the application and just move on to the next website. So in that sense, for us as designers, it's important to keep this in mind, to keep users on their journey, keep them on track, and be able also to provide all the services and products that our applications are capable of doing. Good, and then finally, feedback and user control. We have roughly discussed this already, but this is a direct and explicit example, and this is from Google Translate. And here essentially is that designers have integrated this thumbs up and down feature that enables users to provide feedback into how valuable the recommendation is. So then they are moved on to a form where they can select how valuable this is. And finally, they are provided with this window that says that their experience is being enhanced by the feedback that they provide. So we need to then, keep in mind how large, how extensive we want to create these feedback loops. So many options. People may not have much time, but it is mostly to help developers improve the system, the model in the background. And this is how we present then in the interface these ethical elements, this human-centered design when creating applications that address customers' needs. Good, so we have here data privacy. Many of you may have been involved, may have seen this already on the web when you are informed that your data is being used, and it is mostly for applications that have been deployed in the European market. So you always see these messages, how your privacy is being protected, and if you want to learn more, you also go there, and you're also informed where you can go to change your settings. So ideally, every application should have something in this direction, that you can read more how your data is used, and then you're also able to adjust your settings. Good, the takeaways of my presentation. So essentially, ethical AI, it's part of a fundamental human need, human rights, and this should be accounted in all businesses. There should be ways in which designers could evolve organically their design practices to embed human-centered design that integrates ethical AI. And also, different businesses have demonstrated that ethical AI is possible. It can be operationalized, and I think it is a matter of just all of us designers to embrace these examples, these guidelines, and then create our own design principles around human-centered AI. Good. I would like to finalize my presentation with this quote. The three big categories for building ethics into AI are first, creating an ethical culture, then being transparent, and then finally taking the action. I hope my presentation was inspirational for you and that you can take these messages back home and take action on ethical AI. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this very interesting talk. I mean, we've been talking a lot about AI in this conference, and it's important to address, of course, the ethics aspect of this technology. So I think we have a couple of minutes for some questions. So if you could just raise your hands if you have any. Okay, we have one over there. So if you can bring the mic. Okay, do we have a mic for questions on the other side? Okay, yeah, it's coming. Yes.
Hello, thank you for an inspirational talk. I have a question about training the AIs. So you can design them ethically and you can code them ethically, but you have to train them on data sets that people collect. So is there a way to rate or rank data sets based on the kinds of information? I know there are data sets that are misogynistic or data sets that are ageist or racist. Is there a way to say these data sets have these biases and to somehow counter those biases?
Yeah, awesome question. Thanks a lot for it. Well, essentially, what is proposed for designing ethical AI is to keep having interdisciplinary teams. I know that in the design community we have more or less embraced this concept, but we need to do that more often. And the reason behind this is that with ethical AI it becomes more evident the need to create systems that account for diversity of cultures, diversity of opinions, of representation in the data sets. And therefore, you need then essentially, well, the designer, the business people who may help prioritize what are the features or the elements that are of most relevance, of most value for the business at the moment. But as well, you also need ethicists. So people, specialists in ethical practices, social sciences, sociologists, and maybe also philosophers, who can help bring a voice to the communities that these products are targeting, that are addressing. And the reason behind this is that, well, we can try to create standardized products that somehow are suitable for different groups, different segments, but the reality is that we need to fine-tune these elements into what these different groups consider is ethical or unethical and how well represented they feel by these data sets presented. And this is then an important aspect. So what I would say to answer your question is that we need to continue having interdisciplinary thoughts and actually reflect these thoughts in the discussions we have and in the actions that are then taken. As designers, we essentially provide an interface that helps enable, or in other words, that enables enhancing the data sets and the model that is created in the back end. But designing the model itself, the data sets, and the diversity of this should be something that should derive from a business priority itself and from the design, the strategy of the product from the very beginning. Yep.
Thank you so much. And I think, if you have other questions, you can probably find Giovanni around the conference and ask a little bit more about this very interesting topic. So let's have a last round of applause.
Thank you
so much.
Thanks. Thank you.